Hello, hello, Emma. Welcome to the Mentally a Badass podcast. I'm so happy to have you today.
I'm so happy to be here.
I'm very excited to talk to you because when I talk to a guest before, I can tell we have a good vibe already going. So we're going to have a great conversation. Today, we are going to be talking about your experience in domestic violence and being a survivor. This topic is so important because, like, so many women are going through it, may not even realize it, not even know the red flags. So I love bringing on people who are a survivor, who have been through it, just so we can talk about it, like all the red flags. So your ex-husband, you guys had a really good like romantic relationship in the beginning. Can we go back a little bit and tell me a
Sure.
little bit about that?
Sure. So I met my ex-husband in college. It was actually my final year in college and we met in the summer. We were kind of from different backgrounds. He was a frat boy and I was kind of an alternative girl. I wasn't in the Greek system, but we happened in the summer, everything would shrink down. And so everybody was at the same parties. And so we ended up meeting at a party one night and it just was a very idyllic romance in the beginning. He was really good looking. My friends were really enamored of him. He was really charming, very intelligent, and very much focused on me and very sort of complimentary of me. And really, I felt at the time saw who I was on the inside instead of just the outside, and really what felt to me like a soulmate relationship. And so we spent that summer together and we ended up dating all through that next year and up until I graduated, all through my graduation. And it just was there were a lot of very ideal things going on. It was what I considered the most kind of ideal storybook romance that I had had up to that.
Would you say it sounds kind of like a twin flame in a way?
It felt
Yeah.
that way. It did feel like the very first night we kind of saw into each other. And I definitely felt like he was honed in on me. And to me, that was very attractive. I think I was looking for intensity in a relationship. And I had prior to this had very intense relationships. My parents' marriage was it was on the way to ending after 30 years and they had had a very lukewarm marriage, and so I think I just knew I didn't want that, and I wanted a lot. I was really attracted to intensity in a relationship.
Yeah, I was literally the same way. And when you were talking about like your whole college experience, my last year of my college experience, kind of like, I'm not gonna say like similar. I actually didn't end up dating this person, but it was kind of like that intensity. But I ended up moving to a different state. So actually, I think that kind of saved me because he was like trying to convince me to not. Like, we actually never even dated. Of course, this is going to be about you. But let me just tell you this little, like, this quick thing.
Please go ahead.
It's a little TMI, but I don't really
I would
care.
love to hear.
So this person I met in like one of my classes, and we started like studying together. I'm like kind of like an alternative person too, and he's kind of like the football, like, actually I'm trying to think if he was in a frat. I think technically he wasn't, but he like kind of like the honorary one or whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, it was that kind of. But I know he was definitely in football in high school. So honestly, I truly thought he just wanted to study. So yeah, no, we went to like we didn't go to like my apartment dorm thing, but there was like actually like rooms for studying in those buildings. So we did do that in the beginning, and we were studying, right? And then of course naturally, there's flirting and there's this and there's that, whatever. And he was also like a party guy and like a guy that all the girls would like go after him, if you know what
Hmm.
I mean. And I'm like that kind of person. I don't run after guys. I mean, I did a little bit in high school when I was a freshman, but that was like the old me. In your year of college just means a different person. So I was just like, I'm not that kind of person. I'm like, if you think about like those like romantic movies and such, like, and you can relate. Like, we're the alternative girls.
Yes.
Like we're not like the cheerleaders. Like, oh hey, like I don't know. I think I'm trying to think of some like stereotypical name or something like hello, Bobby. I don't know.
Yes.
Yeah, like you have like, all these girls around like obsessed, and we're just like in our little like shell or whatever. And then he ends up liking this person, and that's kind of usually how it goes. And it's like a romantic, like it's one of those like coming of age teenage
Yes.
movies. Yes,
Yes.
that's what it.
Absolutely.
Yes,
Absolutely.
right. So it kind of felt like that in college, and then so I was playing really hard to get because I'm just like that. And then so one night we we did sleep together, and then right after that he like left right after, And then he just like, and then he just did it with somebody else. And I was
No.
like, all right. Really hope hopefully my mom doesn't listen to this, or my dad.
Well,
I mean, either ways, I'm a 29-year-old woman. It's fine.
that's right. That's right. Own it.
But yeah, no, I still think about that, and I'm just like, what? Okay, yeah, then I forgive. Then he apologized. And it was like a lot of back and forth, back and forth. And then
Sure.
we weren't even dating. And then like an old friend of mine was visiting, who like back in the day I did have like a thing with this person. And he'd get all like jealous, and then oh god, it was just like crazy. And then at one point he was trying to convince me to not could move to Florida. And then there'd be moments like years later he would still like text me and like flirt with me and just like do these like one time he was like drunk and I was like and think he got into a car and I was freaking out because I was in Florida and he was in New
Okay.
Jersey and I'm like, okay, either like he's actually in danger or he's just trying to get my attention, if you know what I mean.
Right. Try and keep you
So
on the hook. Sure.
right. So I call him. I'm like freaking out. I'm like, should I call 911? Like, I don't, if he was like really, either way, obviously you shouldn't be driving and drinking. But luckily he's alive. He didn't like kill anybody or anything like that. But it was just that kind of like, craziness. You know what I mean? And
Yes.
it was a lot of blocking and unblocking and
Huh?
blocking and then
And yes.
unblocking. And then
Yes.
in my head, I'm just like, why did I like, usually I had so much healing that I did throughout the years. And all of a sudden I'm like getting attracted to this like toxic like
Yes.
relationship.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well,
So
that
then,
tumultuousness, it really kind of serves to reel you in and keep you tethered to it, right? Because it's interesting, it's intense, and it's so complicated. You spend your time trying to almost decode it. And
mm-hmm.
it keeps you really tied to it, I think.
Yeah, and I think like the way our brains work is like if anything gets boring, we just have to just find something that excites us. At least that's
Mm-hmm.
me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like that. I like really. I'm not gonna say I don't like it about myself. 'Cause I've been trying lately to not criticize myself.
Good for
But
you.
something I'm working on. But yeah, I feel like when you were talking about that, I was like, I completely relate to you on that part. But let's get to the part where he was showing some red flags. So you
Yes.
guys, got married. How long were you guys dating before?
We dated 4 to 4.5 years before we actually got married.
Oh, okay, so for 4 years, this was
Yes.
like the coming of age kind of vibe,
Yes.
right?
Yes. Although I will say that looking back, there were red flags very early on.
Okay.
Just whatever was programmed into me, I was there to endure it. And yeah, there were red flags pretty early on. There was a lot of breaking up with me, like you were saying about the blocking and unblocking, right? We would be, one day so in love, and he would be so enamored of me, but
Hmm.
maybe that evening, if we would go out and we'd disagree over something, he would break it off, and then he wouldn't speak to me for days, and it was so confusing. But then we would end up getting back together slowly. We'd see each other again. And it would happen 4 or 5 times. So those were some early red flags. And that I think only intensified sort of that cat and mouse feeling, that really tethered me to wanting to be with him. And then there were insults early on. I remember one of our first early dates coming out and him saying, I had on a red shirt, and it was one of my favorites. And he said, "Oh, you don't look good in red." And I thought, "Oh, well, no one's ever said that." And then after that, it was, oh, girls who wear red, they're trying to get attention. They're trying to shine the spotlight on them. And so I never wore red after that, from the beginning of that relationship until we divorced. So it would be, I guess, 12 or 13 years later, I didn't own any red. I had stopped buying it because he had sort of chiseled away at, oh, you're trying to draw attention to yourself. He also would do some insulting of my weight. And I'm here to tell you that in college, I think I weighed maybe 95 to 100 pounds. I was naturally really thin.
Hmm.
And I remember we would go places, and maybe I had put on, a couple pounds or something, but he would say, what's going on with your weight? You're melting. Or one day I had a breakout and we were going on a date, and he was like, what's going on with your face? I don't want to be with a girl who's got zits. Those are horrible things to say to someone, right? But for me at that stage in my life, even though it hurt my feelings or it made me mad at the time, I think I took people mistreating me as, I absorbed it as a rejection of me, right? So that made me want to stay there and fight and overturn the rejection and prove to myself that I can prove myself to this person, that I'm better than they think I am. Whereas now, as the healed version of myself, if someone said that to me, I would come home and tell all my girlfriends how ridiculous they are. And I would absolutely put that on them and their character. But at that age, at 21, I didn't have that kind of self-esteem. I didn't have that kind of solid, firm vision of myself. And he also did some other things that were definite red flags, like he would insult other women around us. They say of an abuser, he'll punch near you before he punches you. Well, with verbal abuse, he was insulting people around me. So we were playing cards one night, and I remember him having one of his fraternity brother's girlfriends happened to be there, was playing cards, and I think her boyfriend was out of town or something. And I don't remember what she said. I think she called a musician cute or something, and he said, "Well, I didn't know you were such a whore." And she cried in front of us, and I was so embarrassed, but
I
it
mean,
was,
I would too.
yeah, well, of course. And she was a sweet girl. I think she was the fraternity sweetheart. No one had ever said anything like that to her before. She was very liked and respected. And he just would do that with women, with my friends. I had friends suddenly he didn't like, critical. So those were early red flags that I absolutely endured and pushed right through because I had already decided on the relationship.
Wow. I actually never heard that before. Like they will punch near you before they punch you. I've
Yeah.
interviewed a lot of women who've, escaped narcissist relationship, and you're the first person that said that.
Yeah, it's true. I've seen it a couple other places, but with verbal abuse, it's really true that you'll see them. It may be, they're rude to your waiter or they berate a service person. Those are some early red flags. And I've told my girls since they were young, a person who's rude to a waiter but nice to you is not a nice person. How you treat service people, how you treat the people around you, a jerk who is nice to you is not right. That's not right for you.
Yeah, yeah, that would be such a turn off if I was on a date or with somebody and they're like being horrible to the server or mistreating in customer service and hospitality. Especially knowing exactly how it is being in that
Yes.
industry for over a decade, it would definitely be a turn off. I'm trying to remember back to that specific person I was referring to. I was like, I don't know for sure if he ever did that. To be honest with you, anytime we'll hang out, it wouldn't be like me and his friends. It would just be me and him. Like he actually wouldn't even like let me go to the party he's going to. So he would go to like these college parties, like fraternities or whatever, and he wouldn't let me go. And I'm like, why can't I go with you? And he was like, oh, because you're too like pure or something like that.
Interesting. Interesting.
He didn't want me in that crowd. I'm like,
Sure.
and I guess in my head I was thinking like, oh, I guess he's trying to like protect me. But
Uh-huh.
I kind of was a little annoyed, thinking like, okay, I'm not like a little princess and angel. Like I'm I'm not like I've done parties. Like he didn't know me and he just met me that year. Like he doesn't know what I've done. I mean, I'm not like out here doing coke or anything like
Right.
that, but I've been partying in high school and college, and like I've partied before. It's not like I've never been to a party or never been to a fraternity party. I have
Sure.
many times. So it was like, so in my head, I was thinking like, it's not like I've never been to a party before. Like this is, so then in my head, at first I was like, oh, he's just like trying to protect me, but also I'm thinking like, what are you doing at that party?
Right. What don't you want me to see? Yeah. No, I'm with you. I think that's probably a red flag too, right?
I kind of feel like I was like his dirty little secret in a way.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that happens. I think that happens a lot. And I think we don't always recognize it at the time because I think if we want something to be better than it is, we do a lot of mental gymnastics to tell ourselves that it is that ideal thing versus what the
Mhm.
reality of it is. And I think I did a lot of that in this relationship when I was young and to lead me into the marriage with this person. There were plenty of
Mhm.
signs, plenty of.
And I think I like just allowed it to happen to me. And it was post breakup that I had. I
Mhm.
dated this guy for 2 years, and it was pretty much post breakup. So you can tell like that last semester of college, my mind was somewhere else.
Yes.
So I think like even though I knew it was toxic and like this is just like your basic. I was like, it's just your basic college. Like people obviously just sleep around and whatever. And honestly, who knows? I probably did. I've had a wild time my last semester of college. I think back at it now because right now I'm in a serious relationship. Like I'm not married, but in a way I kind of like settled down. Like I live with him. Like it's not like I'm going around trying to, but that I feel like my last. Actually, no, that wasn't my last time. Okay, I'm kind of like going completely all over the place. But
Okay.
before you met him, did you have like a post breakup experience like I did, or like
Yes.
was it? Oh,
Yes.
okay.
I
Can
was
we?
coming off of another bad relationship.
Oh, okay. Do tell.
Well, I was coming off of a relationship where I had, okay, so here's how, so I had met this guy when I was moving into my home, this rental home that my girlfriends and I were moving into in the summer. We were painting when we first got there, and I was painting my room. And so the windows were open. And I think in the night you could see right in, and somebody was shining a laser pointer onto the wall where I was painting. And so we were trying to figure it out. We went outside. Well, we met these two guys who are DJs. We ended up hanging out with them, and I ended up dating one of them. And he was not abusive, but he was a liar and very much a womanizer, and had cheated on me. I think taken my own car and gone and cheated on me with some woman, and just, behavior that was beneath me. But that was really upsetting for me. So I was coming off of that kind of a relationship at the time.
Wow. So even though he technically didn't abuse you, he technically did at the same time.
Yes,
Emotional
it
abuse.
certainly wasn't a pleasant situation.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
It wasn't a respectful relationship. It wasn't healthy. And again, I was clinging to it.
And uses your car and your mileage on there. How dare he?
Mm-hmm.
That's
Mm-hmm.
crazy. He better be at
Mm-hmm.
least paying for the gas bill. No, I'm
That's
just
right.
kidding.
That's right.
It would have been worse if he crashed a car. So he first crashed a car. No, wait, he drives the car, does whatever with that person, then crashes the car. And then
Yes.
now you got to deal with a car that's totaled, and you got that guy with the girl who that would have been a
That
mess.
would have been a mess, wouldn't it? Yes.
I'm just
Yes.
creating these fake scenarios. But I was just thinking, like, laughing, like, like, just some people, it's just, they're so ridiculous that I just like have to make a joke about it just because it's
Sure.
so crazy.
Sure. We got to get through it with humor, don't we?
Tell me about it. That's like what this whole brand's about. Like once you see like the Instagram account, like we'll talk later, you'll see what I'm talking about.
Okay.
Okay, so let's skip forward here.
Sure.
You're married to him. I think you said it was like 15 years. How
I
long?
was with him a total of 12 or 13 years, but we were married for 8. So we were together 4 years, got married, and then we were together married 8 years.
And then like had kids too.
I had 2 kids.
Gotcha. So when was the turning point? When was like it was an event that it was so bad you're like, okay, I need to get out of here.
There were a lot of bad events that for me should have been a deal breaker, but were not, because I was very much attached to the idea of having that nuclear family for my children. My parents had divorced when I was graduating college, and it just killed me that my family of 4 had broken apart, and I didn't have that. And so I was really hell bent on keeping my family intact for these kids. And because he was verbally abusive and emotionally abusive to me, that wasn't enough for me, because he was still treating my kids well, right? But what I didn't understand, what I have come to understand, is that an abuser isn't a good parent, right? They're a terrible role model. So the turning point for me was realizing that. Was one day, 2 things happened in one day that caused the turning point for me. I was in a chair that I sat in a lot upstairs in a lofted area, and it was upstairs and it would be away from him because he was working from home. And I was rocking in the chair and watching my son play. And I think I had been screamed at that morning, and I was crying in the chair, but my son was 3 or so, and I didn't think he noticed, And I remember him coming over to me and saying, "Mommy, why do you always cry in your sad chair? Is it because daddy yells at you all the time and he brought me a tissue?" And it occurred to me, okay, when he was really little, he didn't see this going on, but he can see this. And he's telling me I have a sad chair. And then that
Mhm.
same afternoon, we went to pick up my daughter at school. And I think she was 5 or 6. And we were driving, and my husband was screaming at me through the phone while I was in the car. And my kids were in the back. And the kids could hear it. It wasn't speakerphone, but he was screaming and berating me. And when I got off the phone, my daughter said to me, "Mommy, I know, I have an idea. When we go in, I'll go in first and I'll act really, really cute so that he won't be mean to you." And something clicked in my head. She is learning, she's being conditioned to tiptoe around him to try and fix this for me. She sees what's going on. And I could just see it in that moment that one day, if I don't get out of here, this is going to feel normal to her. Somebody's going to treat her this way and it's going to feel like home. And I don't think I had the self-esteem at the time to get out for myself. But once I realized, I really loved my children. Once I realized this was going to hurt them and it was going to seal their fate in a bad direction, it was, to me, that was the turning point. I knew I had to get out after that. And that was the day that I had tried to kick him out several other times over behaviors. That was the day that I had resolved to do it. And that was the last time that I asked him to leave.
From what you're saying and from other women that I've spoke to, from what their turning point was the children. And when you
Yes.
notice that the children are recognizing what's happening, because even like even before they can verbalize it to you, they feel like the energy, even though they don't even know they're feeling the energy of what's happening around here. And I feel like a lot of people, it's true, a lot of people don't understand energy
Yeah.
and how that kids are actually picking up everything you're saying. I have a friend that is currently in it right now.
Mm-hmm.
And about a couple months ago, she did tell me that her son, I'm not going to talk too much about it just for her privacy. I know I never mention names, but I don't, just to be respectful of her, of course. But he did say something that is giving him the idea of what's actually happening. And
Okay.
he's
Yeah.
now
Yeah.
around there. And her daughter just, I think, is 3 right now.
Yeah, and people will say, "Well, our kids don't hear us fight. We don't fight in front of the kids." The kids do pick up on it. I listened to
Yeah.
my parents fight when I was young. They thought I was asleep. If you live in the same house with someone, you have a very good idea of what goes on in the relationships between the people, whether you think they're old enough to recognize it or not.
Yeah, even if they don't see the actual argument, like the
Hmm.
next day or moments after that, like you just can tell something happened
Yeah, it changes the
before
mood.
that.
Yeah, there's a tension, and yeah, and that's not good for them either.
Yeah. When you guys divorced and you made it your way out of this abusive relationship, how did he take it?
Not well.
Assuming that.
Not well, Justine, not well. He didn't take it well, but there was also a factor of denial for a long time. And
Hmm.
so I think I think he was kind of calling my bluff for a while. And once I wasn't coming back right away, because I had kicked him out and then brought him back multiple
Hmm.
times, that's a very common part of the cycle, right? I mean, it's hard to, most people when they divorce don't just say get out once. But
Hmm.
I think that had trained him over time that I'll be able to get her back. Once he saw that I wasn't coming back after, a few weeks, he started to punish me and almost try to manipulate me to come back through what I now hear labeled economic abuse. So I didn't have a job at the time. He had encouraged me before we had our first child to give up my career. So he had all the money and he had a lot of money. Our kids were in a private school. We lived in a very nice home and he had moved out of the home into an apartment. Well, when he realized that I wasn't going to reconcile with him, it suddenly was, you've got to move out of that house. You can't afford that house on your own. And even though I had gone back into the workforce, I wasn't making as much money as him. I couldn't afford the mortgage on my own. So he was no longer willing to help pay the mortgage to keep our kids in the home with me. So we had to move out. He would threaten to not pay the private school tuition, which would hurt our kids, right? So I would
Mm.
have to barter with him because I didn't want my kids to go through their parents divorcing and having to leave all their friends and
Yeah.
go to a new school. He would do things like that to sort of make my life as difficult as possible. I think in effort to make him look more ideal. In reality, we were beyond that point. He should have, if he wanted to save the marriage, he should have, gone into counseling years and years before
Mm.
and made himself better. But instead, he was trying to make being a single mother as difficult as possible for me, kind of using financial strains against me.
That's crazy. And the fact that he like used your kids as like pretty much
Yeah.
collateral damage.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's insane. So when you guys kind of, I know in your story that he doesn't have like any custody, and we're gonna get into that. When you guys went to court, like how did that play out? Because at the end of the day, it's like since it is his kids, like doesn't he have to legally help
Yes.
financially?
So initially we were 50-50.
Okay.
And he was given an amount of child support to pay. So yeah, I did have child support from him, but in our original discussion, it was you'll stay in the house. And on my, even with the child support, I couldn't afford that home. It was a really nice home. So so he did have custody. He had 50-50 custody, and he had the kids half the time when we first divorced.
Hmm.
And then slowly, as his behavior started to change, he became a doomsday prepper. Over time, he became really, really enmeshed in all of these conspiracy theories. I started to take them over there less and less because some really concerning things were happening in front of the kids when I wasn't there. He was threatening people in public. He was kind of indoctrinating our son into these conspiracy theories, and
Hmm.
just really, really changing after I wasn't in the house anymore. So I had, at one point, things got so bad. He was threatening people on the interstate with the kids in the car with an axe, waving an axe at people pulling up alongside vehicles with our little kids in the car, and waving an axe and having our son hold the axe to scare people. And so at that point, I stopped taking them over there. I didn't go to
Yeah.
court. I had a lawyer who said, get a recording of him admitting he's doing this. Stop taking them over there. If he contests it, we'll go to court and we'll do something. So from there, that's when the visitation stopped.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. If I heard that my kid was doing that, I'd be like, "What are you doing?
Yeah,
How did like?" I'm sure this doesn't just happen randomly. He said he was getting into conspiracy theories. Was he like watching them like on YouTube?
he
Like
was.
how did he
He,
go from?
He was a really intelligent guy, and he was a
Yeah.
high level professional, but he was one of those people who, sometimes you have people who are so intelligent, they kind of balance on that fine line between being intelligent and being revered for that, and also feeling ostracized. Because I think if you're that smart, it's hard to find other people like you, right? So I
Yeah.
think over time, he did have a history of mental illness in his family, and over time, little things happened. The economy was starting to change, and in his job, he had to really predict, what was going to happen in the economy. So he would research it, research it, research it. Well, somehow along the line of doing that, he fell into these conspiracy websites, and he was following Alex Jones and Jeff Rentz, and he was pouring through these conspiracy theories day in, day out. And it started as just like some political things, but then it became kind of that Illuminati and, the lizard
Mm.
people roaming the earth. And you couldn't, we couldn't say the sky looked pretty because there would be those lines in the sky, the contrails, and he would believe they were just poisoning us with chemicals, and we couldn't have TV in our house anymore, and no fluoride in our toothpaste, and things like that.
Wow, that's very interesting because there's like one level of just being like cautious, of course, of like your health, because you know how we talk about like the food industry and how there's people saying that the government's putting stuff in the air to, I mean, in reality, pollution.
Sure, sure.
I mean
Yeah, there's
that's
pollution.
yeah, exactly. So it's kind of like different levels of it. You
It
know what I
is.
mean?
It
Where it's
is.
like, okay, you're being cautious, but then people lose touch of reality.
Yes, because I will say for myself, I was a mother who was paying attention to things like preservatives in food, and I still do
Hmm.
that. I
Yeah,
still I still research things. I still know, oh, this dye is linked to this cancer, and some people
yeah.
might think that that's too out there. So I did have some of that in me, right? I was a conscientious mother when it came to my kids' health, but he took it to this new level,
Yeah.
and then we weren't vaccinating the kids anymore. And also, when my kids were born, I wasn't allowed to get social security numbers for them. He believed it would tie them to things in the government that would come back and hurt them later. So all of these things, after I divorced, I had to take my kids into the doctor. And for years, every time they went to the doctor, they'd have to get multiple shots to try and catch up. I had to jump through so many hoops to get my kids' social security numbers because they were so old at that point. I just had to backtrack a lot. I wasn't able to parent how I wanted to because his values and his ideals about the world were really, really stringent. And if I were to disagree or push back, I was going to get insulted, and he was going to insult me personally in a way that would cause a huge blow up, or that was really going to scar me. He was really smart, so he could always call me stupid, and I would never have as many facts as him. I didn't know as much about history and politics, so it could be really difficult to argue with him, while at the same time, as a mother, I was trying to hold my ground and parent my kids how I wanted to.
So I want to go back with the social security thing. So
Hmm.
your kids never got a social security number? Isn't that
Well,
like
they have them now. When they
no,
were
but like when they were
born,
born.
right. So when your kids are born, at least where we were living, I believe, I don't remember exactly how it was. They gave you a packet to apply for the official birth certificate. You don't just have a baby and they hand you the card and the birth certificate.
You
You've
know,
got to
I thought
fill out.
that.
Yeah. Now well, I did too until I had
I never
kids,
had a
right?
baby. I never had a
Yeah.
baby, but I guess I never asked my sister or my mom or I never when you go to the
I am
hospital.
sure it is different in every
Yeah,
state. In the particular state we were
maybe.
living, yeah, and it probably is different in every state, but in the state we were living
Okay.
in, they handed us this packet at the hospital with all this, all this different information. And part of those were forms to fill out to get the official birth certificate. So they printed out, some birth certificate at the hospital that you could not use for official means anywhere. To
Okay.
apply for the birth certificate, I believe you had to apply for the social security number. And so we didn't do any of that. And so if we were filling out forms, going forward as my kids were getting older, we would just leave it blank. And
Mm-hmm.
he would say, just leave it blank and hope for the best. And a lot of times no one would say anything. But I remember when we divorced, them saying on the stand to him, your children have no social security numbers, and him spouting off some conspiracy into the mic, and the judge looking really concerned and saying, how are your kids going to pay taxes? How are your kids going to
Yeah.
have jobs one day? And it was like he wasn't hiding it anymore. He was, just out there with his conspiracies. It was interesting.
Yeah, cause I was gonna say that, like how can they get a job? How can they go to like college or buy a car, buy a house?
Well, think of it this way, because I used to say the same things, but at one day it occurred to me, I am arguing with someone who believes that the apocalypse is around the corner. By around the corner, I don't know. Did he think it was 2 months away? Did he think it was 2 years away? He thought it was imminent, right? And he thought
Mhm.
it was coming for sure. So put yourself in that space. If you believe this is in a month, do you want to buy tickets to go to Jamaica with your wife? Are you worried about, what will happen to your 3-year old when they're 16 and they want to get a job? No, because you believe that you've got all of this to deal with, and that none of that, all of that part of society is going away. And so I had to learn one day, it hit me like you're arguing with someone who doesn't see the future the same way that you do. And so, yeah, it was really, really difficult.
Yeah, and it takes a lot to like learn that not everybody has the same brain as us because there are a lot of people that assume that we do.
Yes.
And it's just kind of like sometimes people can get frustrated, be like, "Oh, how can these people think like that? Oh my god, like they're just it doesn't make any sense. They're crazy or whatever." And like it's just what you're saying and how you're explaining is like some people's brains like and what they've learned and conditioned, it's like they truly believe that. So
Yes. Yes.
yeah, even though you don't, yeah, even though it could seem insane to the other person, it's like it's kind of sad. You know
Yeah,
what I
we're
mean?
all living a different existence in
Oh
here,
yeah.
right? Some
Uh
people
huh.
have a voice in their head narrating things, some people don't. Some people are visual, some people, and you're right, we're a product of our experiences to a large
Mm.
degree. And so he had gone through all of these things. And I think he was starting to slip into some mental illness at that time. And that was really scary.
Yeah. I want to jump to the part where he was an active shooter.
So, a few years after we had left, after I had divorced him, and then we had tried visitation for a time, and then we had stopped the visitation because, as I said, he was putting the kids in danger, and being violent with people in public. And I just said no more. I remarried at some point over the years, and we moved. We moved a state away.
Hmm.
And he didn't contest it. And my attorney said, he won't because he's paranoid. And so he never did. So he never contested that. He had stopped seeing the kids. We had started to rebuild our lives. And I had been remarried for a couple of years. And one day I was in the grocery store with my two kids. And I think they were 8 and 10 at the time. And I got a call from my ex-father in law who I had a great relationship with, and saying to me, Emma Jean, Alec is shooting at his neighbors. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, the sheriff wants to talk to you. He wants to know what kinds of guns he has. And so I had to, hightail it out of the store, put my kids in the car, stand outside the car and call this sheriff. What the sheriff told me is that he had been shooting his automatic weapons, his AR style rifles at over 1,000 rounds shot at people going by on the county road. So he lived in a rural area, but he had started
Mm-hmm.
to believe that the county road belonged to him. I think he believed it was the apocalypse, because he had isolated himself even further. He had moved out of this $500,000 home we lived in to this tiny shack, like a Unabomber style shack.
Mm-hmm.
And he was living out on this property, and he was firing off. He was stepping out when people were driving, his neighbors were driving on the road, and shooting at their cars. He luckily did not hurt a person. He damaged some cars. He shot at the police when they went out to take the statement. So that day I was to, give information to the police about what kinds of weapons he had, how dangerous did I think he was, what was his thinking. I had to tell them about the guns that he had stockpiled, kind of his doomsday thinking. And then they went in that evening and they surrounded him when it was dark. They had closed off the road so that he couldn't shoot at any more people. They went in that evening and they got him on the ground, and he did resist, and they took him into custody. And so when he was then incarcerated, right? So then I had to go out to his property before they foreclosed on this land that he was no longer paying on. And my current husband and I had to go out there and retrieve all his belongings. And there were bullet casings. I think they're bullet casings just everywhere, all over the land, just thousands and thousands and thousands scattered kind of in this little doomsday area that he was living in. And so it was just, it was something else. I did not know he was living that way at the time. It was a really harrowing experience, and it was scary to me how much of a downward spiral he had taken.
Do you think that he could have potentially been experiencing psychosis? Because
Yes.
usually, okay,
Yes. Yes.
I hit on the nail there. Okay.
Yes. Yes. I don't, in our years together, I had wanted to get him to a psychiatrist many times. And what you'll find with people who are paranoid is that the very thing that they're suffering from, the paranoia, is the very thing that keeps them from going and getting help. Because in his mind, if I were to take him to a psychiatrist, they would put him on a government list, and he thought one day he'd be in like an internment camp. He just had very, very specific thinking about why he wouldn't go to a doctor, why he wouldn't go see someone. So he never was clinically diagnosed. And, you can't diagnose somebody who you don't examine, right? So he never saw a psychiatrist. So we don't know specifically, but we do know that his past history, there was bipolar with psychosis. And so I believe, and I have heard people say, this is a little like schizophrenia. So I think there are episodes for him. I think he has psychotic episodes that he goes in and out of. And you can see it in his communication even now. I don't speak to him. I have not responded to him in over a decade, but a couple times a year I will get messages, and thinking in them is very skewed thinking.
Yeah, if he had bipolar, it's in bipolar 1, they do have like episodes with psychosis, which is horrifying. But I've
Yeah,
known people that have gone like naked, have thrown TVs at nurses, have
yeah,
like peed on the roof, got
sure.
arrested. It's horrifying. It's like, I mean, I personally have bipolar 2.
Okay.
Thankfully, I never experienced psychosis or anything like that. It's mostly in bipolar 2 is like a not as intense as bipolar
Mm-hmm.
1. Bipolar 1, you can get in trouble with the authorities and such. Bipolar
Yes,
2, they're more likely to be like harming themselves. So
sure.
it's interesting. Like bipolar 1 is more manic. Bipolar 2 is like you may never get out of bed kind of thing.
Yes. And I'm sure then having that diagnosis, that especially with bipolar 1, it's very dangerous to use drugs. So he was using a lot of narcotics at home, I think probably to self-medicate, but I think that
Mm-hmm.
was making the problems worse. And I think it was triggering the psychosis. And I think that's probably still the case with him, if I had to guess.
100%. The person that I know, that's what happened to him.
Yeah.
I think I don't know if he was on coke or I don't know which hard drug it was, but that's what triggered. Maybe it was LSD. I don't know. It was
Yeah.
something in that. I think at the time he wasn't diagnosed. They didn't know he had it, but then when he had an episode, then they diagnosed him with bipolar 1. So
Okay.
it was a drug that because some people are born. Wait, not like it's interesting. It's like I don't want to say people are born with bipolar, but they are like could have like the gene for it if it's
Sure.
triggered. So
Sure.
like if this person that I'm referring to, never took a drug or never did that, maybe it
Yes.
would be a different story. But
Yes.
the drug kind of like woke it up in the brain.
Yes. So you're
Yeah,
genetically predisposed. And
that's
then
what I
there
want to
are,
say.
you can go through trauma, or you can go through drug abuse, or you can go through some sort of a brain injury that can also trigger those things. Or you could also not have any of that happen and be genetically predisposed and turn out, with never having the onset of it.
It's
And
very complex.
it is complex, but in his case, it was a lot of drug use at home that I think really did kind of trigger it, and then just kind of took him, snowballed pretty quick.
Yeah, yeah. Mine was more of childhood trauma that eventually there was like one event that kind of I think that's what I don't think it triggered it. I think I've had the moments, but I just didn't like know what it was
Yeah.
throughout high school. Like I with the self harming episodes I've had, but they after that they diagnosed me like, oh yeah, bipolar 2, and I was like, okay, that's nice. Oh, I didn't say it like that, but in a way, it was kind of like a relief, just so I knew what was wrong, so I
Yes.
can treat and medicate and stuff. Like right now, I'm currently medicated. There's been times I was on and off it, but
Yes.
I try and convince myself to keep staying on it because sometimes when I'm like stable, I'm good, I feel normal. I'm like, okay, I think I'm good. I have the tools. Like I'm seeing this person, my life is getting back together, we're good, I'm meditating, I'm going to the gym, like I can do this.
Yes.
And I in my head I'm kind of currently going through that right now, and I have to be like, Justine, stop it, stop it. Like because last time I went
Heard
off on
it's pretty common, right? To go on,
yeah.
for people to go on and off, because, correct me if this is wrong, but I have friends who also have been diagnosed with bipolar, and who are on the medication, and they have said, I don't always feel like myself when I'm on the medication. And so I start to believe, I can feel more if I'm off the medication.
Yeah, so the feeling more part, I would say that part's correct. Like when I right now I'm on a antipsychotic and antidepressant. So for the antipsychotic, it pretty much numbs everything. So I'm a very creative person, so I'm emotional and creative, right? But I feel like the meds have made it more hard for me to be creative.
Sure.
Like if you like on the Mentally About Us Instagram account, I make like reels and such, and some of it can be, funny, and some of it's depressing, but like it actually attracts people because they feel what I feel, and it's just a way of thinking, it's just a way of acting, where it's like more on the creative side, and I'm like more emotional. I think deeper. So I think that's the other thing too is that without the meds, I'm able to think deeper
Yes, I can
and
understand
to
that.
like do more art in that way. But like when I'm on the medication, I feel just like any other person. I know this kind of sounds a little weird,
No, I know
but
exactly what you mean. I consider myself to be, I mean, I trend towards the creative kind of thinking, and
yeah.
I'm a pretty emotional person, what they used to refer to as highly sensitive. And so I could understand that if I were to take medication, um, and it took that part for me, I think that's a big part of my identity.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, when I went off it last time, well, that was more for insurance's reasons. 'Cause I left my 9 to 5 and I had to get new insurance. But that was for. But then I was like, okay, yeah, I'm fine, I'm good. Like, basically, I went back on it in 20. I was like I said, I was on and off a lot, but in 2021 ish, I
Hmm.
went on it because I was working a job where I was constantly being like verbally abused, like by guests. I worked at Disney, and it's really like working for Disney. You have to have a certain amount of like tough skin to work there because some people are just so mean. Like
Oh,
but it's like it's repetitive. It's constant every single day. I'm like, who's gonna yell at me today? Who's gonna say this? Like they're really mean people out there, right? So for someone who already has this diagnosis and has his brain and has childhood trauma and also has like BPD and like all the alphabets and the all the letters in the alphabet, it puts me in a position where I'm already a highly sensitive person. And they say like obviously don't take it personal, which I mean they're not wrong. Yeah, I shouldn't take it personal, but it's like my brain is not listening to you.
yes, yes,
It's like
yeah,
I know what you're saying, but my body reacts.
sure.
So sometimes I will be I sometimes would have like an episode and I would have to leave work.
Okay.
And yeah, which is like I thankfully was eligible for FMLA, which is Family Medical Leave Act, meaning that bipolar since I had bipolar, I was allowed like 480 hours out of the year where I was allowed to take off from work for my mental health. So if I didn't have that, I would be fired like
Yeah,
easy because
yeah.
I couldn't get out of bed. I physically could not get out of bed. So since I was constantly in that chronic stress and going through that on a daily basis, all my symptoms flared. So pretty much with like bipolar, if you are put in a very stressful situation, it just comes rushing up to you and all your symptoms come. But if your life is stable, you're not as stressed, it's like you're in remission.
Yes. And you know what? To that point, I think that, you had asked earlier what I think triggered all of this stuff. I think it was probably the economy, and his
Mm,
job was very stressful. And then I think after that, I think that was the first phase of it. And then the drug use to self-medicate. And then I think once I left, that was probably also a very
yes,
triggering event for it to then, because when I left, I would not have imagined that this person is capable of shooting at his neighbors, is going
of
to use
course.
these semi-automatic rifles and shoot them at people. Or when I heard that he had shot at the police, I was shocked. That was not the man that I left. He did have mental illness, and it was starting to spiral, but that wasn't something that I would have thought was in the cards. So I definitely think there was a bigger break after our divorce, and that's probably one of those stressful events.
Yeah, it's really sad. And it kind of makes me think of like all the other active shooters. Like, obviously, it's completely wrong what they're doing. And like, it's so sad. But it's just, I just from a psychological perspective, I try to understand, like, you don't just wake up one day and say, I'm going to go shoot up the
Yes,
school.
that's right.
You
That's right.
know, it's like, even though like when it comes to gun control, I do believe in like, I'm not trying to get political here, but I do believe we did make it very harder to get guns and such.
Sure.
But I do believe that mental health is the main thing that is should be a priority. Guns is
Yes.
definitely a problem too, but I feel like people are not talking about mental health.
There's
It's
not
like,
a good process for dealing with it in the legal system. So one thing I'll tell you is that when I was out on the land and we were recovering all these things, and the sheriff and the other police officers would come out there, I would show them old pictures of him, because at the time when they arrested him, he's living in this tiny little shack. I mean, you wouldn't believe the existence that he was living, and he had very disheveled, this long beard, and looked nothing like he used to look. And I showed them a picture of him, and they said,
uh,
well, he doesn't look anything like this anymore. And I said, he needs to be evaluated. And
yeah.
they didn't take it seriously. And I called several times when he was in the first jail and said, I really feel like this is a good time to be evaluated. He refused before, but now, he's in jail. I feel like it's a good time to get him some help. I don't think we are there yet in the legal
Hmm.
system where everybody knows what to do. And I'm not saying that's the job of the police officers per se.
Hmm.
There should be some sort of liaison in the process, understanding this person is mentally ill, and getting them the
Hmm.
help. Because yes, violent people need to be locked away where they can't hurt people, but we also can help them. There's no reason not to help recover their mental
Yes.
health if we can, because that also safeguards them and us.
Yeah, actually, I think you're referring to like rehabilitation. Like Kim Kardashian actually is trying to do that. Like
Yeah.
she didn't talk much about the mental health, more of just like she does talk about like, okay, people don't just wake up as a criminal. What happened to them? How did they
Yes.
get like you
Yes.
just don't wake up and just like steal from a store
Yes.
or like beat somebody up. Like of course she's referring to those people, not she doesn't talk about like rapists or anything like that. That's a whole different whole different area. But she focuses on how did this person get into a gang? Why do they feel they had to get into a gang? And she's trying to give like all these resources to for people to have a second chance. Of course, they have to prove themselves, but
Yes.
have a second chance because when you eventually get out of jail, it's like you're out of jail, great, but like how you get a job, people are still kind of like, so
Yes.
she's trying to do things and changing that in the system.
To that.
Yeah, especially after everything she does in her life. It's like the fact that she finds that time and energy, it's really cool that she does that. And I wish that the public can see that part of her though.
Me too. I agree with you. That's my thing. That's my, what do they call it when your unpopular opinion or something? I think the Kardashians are pretty nice people, and I think they work really hard. And all
Yeah,
of
me
my friends
too.
disagree with me, but I think that there are some good ideas
Hmm.
in a lot of the ways that they use their talent. I mean, I can't say I can identify with all of it. I'm not a really rich woman, but
Yeah.
I do think that there is value in some of the work that Kim Kardashian has done in that sense, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And like people still see the Kardashians as like these party girls and like big butts and like they're still in that. No, for real. Like that's when you think of
I know.
when I was a child, like when I was a kid when like I think the Kardashians because I'm like closer to like Kylie Jenner's age. So
Hmm.
since she was that age, I wasn't really watching the Kardashians around that time, but there were household names. That's the stuff that I would just be hearing. You know what I mean?
Yes, yes.
So that's how I saw them. And then like in 20 during the pandemic or post pandemic, I was like, oh, let me go watch the Kardashians. I'm like very like curious these like trash reality TV. But then I was like watching it and they had so much growth.
Yes.
So it's just like people don't give them enough credit for that. And also people don't understand that the producers purposely make them look like crazy like that. That's a whole other thing.
I mean,
They
that's
don't get they don't they it's like it's not like they just have a camera and they're following them, which to an extent, yes, but the producers are only gonna put in the crazy parts or the
sure,
to paint a certain picture of them.
sure.
My friend, he does PR in the city. So he goes to these events that the Kardashians are at and he met Chris, Kim, and Kendall. And he
Okay.
had great things to say about him.
Sure. I'm sure they're
Yeah,
lovely. I'm
yeah.
sure they're lovely.
Yeah, because I saw that like he takes these photos and he puts his like his close friend story, and I always just watch him from afar, and I'm just like I hate you. I'm so jealous of you, and I always have to ask. I'm like, okay, you met these celebrities. How are they in real life? Because you never really know until you meet
Sure.
them. And then yeah, he always tells me like the truth. Like apparently Shawn Mendes is a jerk. He told
Really?
me, yeah. Apparently that's apparently what he told me.
I would like to hear all of his opinions. I've got a lot of questions.
Yeah, I know, right? So it's kind of nice to have someone in the inside. I
Yes.
like to find out these things out. But yeah, no. So he told me he's like, I was like, oh, so you met Kim? Like, how is she? He's like, oh, she's chill. I was like, okay, how about Kendall? It's like, oh yeah, no, Kendall, like you can like she's a little awkward, but yeah, no, she's like really nice. And I'm like, oh, okay, like
Okay.
cool. Yeah. So I listen to him. He's my source. I
Yeah.
don't listen to the I don't know, TMZ or whatever, you know what I
Sure.
mean?
You want the firsthand information.
Yes, I'm really big on that. But anyway, I feel like we're going
That's all right.
I blame myself for doing that.
That's all right. That's all right. We moved
This
into the
has
car. We moved from abuse to the Kardashians. But you know what? There's a related
yeah, in a way there is because we're talking about oh yeah, like we're talking about ex-husband and
incarceration
jail.
and yeah,
Hey,
yeah.
and then going into the Kardashians just naturally. Right?
Yep.
So I'm assuming he's still in jail.
No, he is not.
Oh.
And I don't want to get too much into
Yeah.
that, but I will tell
Yeah.
you that there was a problem with the warrant, and so he was in there for quite some time. But no, he's now out in the world.
Okay. I
So
don't know why I was so quiet saying that, but okay, gotcha.
well, I know why you were so quiet, but yeah, it's but again, to what the point we were just speaking to, this is someone who probably needed mental health
Mm-hmm.
interventions, was in a
Yeah.
position where it was the best time to get them and did not get them, and now is back out in the world again. And I don't know, he does not live near me, he's states
Mm-hmm.
away. I often wonder, what are his neighbors experiencing? What are people in
Mm-hmm.
his public area experiencing from him? I don't know.
Yeah, I guess we just gotta hope for the best.
Yeah.
Hope that he's doing okay and
Hmm.
such. Let's talk about your book. Because
Okay.
I was also going to talk about your healing process, but I realized we're almost like over an hour. But I'm sure that they'll read that in your book as well.
Sure.
But
Yes. Yes.
I went on Amazon. I read like the summary, and it's so far from what I've read. I don't have the book, but like from what I've learned, it kind of sounds like I like the way you wrote the summary of that because it takes you into that coming of age kind of.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
I
I was like,
really,
it
yes.
sounds super interesting. So anyway, can you talk a little bit more about your book?
I have my book right here. It's called When Things Collapse by Jean Rowin,
Maybe
and
into
it's
a movie.
available on Amazon. My book is, there are a lot of books about domestic abuse out there. I think mine is unique in that I start off with the story of learning that my ex-husband has become an active shooter, and then I take it all the way back to the beginning because I think it's important for women to see themselves from the outside. I talk about how I got into the relationship. What was I like at that age? What were the red flags I was ignoring? And it's through kind of a storytelling voice. It's not self-help, although there's a lot of insight, I think, from my own perspective about what things allowed me to endure these things, what things helped lead me out, and then the healing that I had to work on after, because you don't just leave.
Yeah.
and all the rainbows come about. I have a very happy life now, but that is because of the work I have done in therapy and learning to make myself whole again, and really just learning gratitude and learning healthy boundaries and filling my life with people who deserve to be there and who are healthy. And those are skills I didn't have before I went to counseling. And I'm not talking about one counseling session or a year of counseling. I'm talking about 7 full years of regular counseling, learning to reprogram myself so that I was not the person who got into that unhealthy relationship in the first place.
Yeah, I really like how it's like story based. I'm like very fascinated. I may just buy the book after we get off here because I'm very curious and low key hope they make it a movie. But honestly, the whole creativity is that it makes it like I'm trying to find the right word, but I like how you started out with the active shooter because then people are gonna be like, because that's definitely very extreme. So then that will obviously hook people, be like, okay, how did he get here? Let's go
Mm-hmm.
backwards. I like that format.
Yes,
That's what I meant to
because
say.
what I want women to see, or anyone who's in an abusive relationship or a toxic relationship, I want them to realize this sounds extreme, but if you look at my relationship over time, I think a lot of people could see themselves in it
Yeah.
and look at their relationship and say, oh, maybe I put up with these things. Maybe put up with is not the right word. Endure. I endure these things when maybe stepping away is the right answer. People to see that I want it to get in the hands of the right women or the right men, and I want them to see themselves from the outside because I could not see how bad my situation was because it was happening to me. But when I read other books, like when I read Educated 8 years after I had left my marriage, I thought, where was this book?
Hmm.
I could have seen some of this doomsday stuff in here. I needed an outside perspective. And I hope for people who are in abusive situations or even just confusing relationships that my book will be the outside perspective they need to look inward.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna definitely buy it because this whole conversation obviously is a snippet of what happened because we can only say so much in an hour. But just having this conversation with you, I'm like, you have a very interesting story that needs to be, heard. And the way you did everything, you made it, of course, interesting for the reader, but also very valuable and very powerful. So I'm going to put your information, of course, in the description so people can check you out. But I want to say thank you so much for taking the time to come on my podcast and tell your story.
Thank you, Justine. I really enjoyed talking to you.